We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution. We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution.
The only thing that will save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.
Welcome, MAHA Warriors. We have a great show today with a whole bunch of really good speakers who will focus mostly on defending the truth and how to combat propaganda, censorship, hit pieces. They are really going crazy with hit pieces in the last week or so, and we all think that it's going to get much worse. In many ways, we've had one of the best weeks, clearly on the vaccine front, but, one of the best weeks that we've had where there have been a lot of victories with DeSantis getting rid of vaccine mandates for K-12 schools, with Marty at the FDA saying, no more blanket mandates, with Trump demanding that Pfizer show us all the data that they have, not in 75 years, not in 20 years, not next year, but right now. That was just a great change. And then, Bobby traveling around the country, going to Texas, logging in MAHA wins at the state level. So there's a lot of really great stuff going on. And that, I think, is what leads to these hit pieces. And, we really just have to stick together and fight them. That clearly there's a war room out there, that they're doing multiple hit pieces on the same person on the same day or the same week. There's no logical argument to fight the successes of MAHA. So the only way they can do that is to go after people personally. So let me just say that there's nobody who could really talk about that kind of censorship and the media onslaught than, nobody better than Dr. Robert Malone. He's been subjected to just a relentless series of attacks over many years. So I'm happy to welcome here Dr. Robert Malone. Okay, it looks like we don't have him yet. So then let's go to, let's see, how about Gary Brecka?
Well, I love the lead-in time that I got there, but
sorry about that.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I echo your sentiment on the hit pieces. There's a few underway right now on me personally. I expect those to be pretty nasty. Some of those folks are on this call, by the way. So every word that you say, could be twisted or taken out of context, and then highlighting every mistake you've made, on your path to becoming who you are. And there's not a person on this call right now who hasn't made mistakes at some point in their past. And I don't believe that highlighting those, even if they're capable of destroying the careers of people like myself or destroying our reputations, I don't think that the collective will slow down the movement. You see now that it's not just the food and beverage industry, right? That we're having strong wins, but this patchwork of legislative wins that we're having at a state level is forcing compliance to be less expensive than circumvention. And we all know the reformulation of products by Kraft and Heinz and Kellogg. These are major wins for us. The Starbucks CEO has also met with Health and Human Services and wants to align with MAHA. We've had a lot of policy engagement, at the Consumer Brands Association, which is like Nestle, General Mills, are really in support now of overhauling these GRAS guidelines, these generally regarded as safe guidelines. And then, in the strategic marketing category, you see even smaller, health-oriented food companies like Sweet Garden and Thrive Market and Daily Harvest and Huve, True Food Kitchen. You see these brands that have been doing the right thing for a long period of time. You see them really emerging as leaders in the space and having a lot of benefit. I even thought about supporting something along the lines of, MAHA approved restaurants, food items, brands, and really rewarding those brands that are truly in service to humanity, that are really thinking about taking all of those additional, sometimes expensive and cumbersome steps to make their food products more, safe for consumers. And I think now you're starting to see the first defensive maneuvers from big companies like PepsiCo and Nestle. They're defensively saying, the scrutiny of MAHA is at such a level now, especially in our processed ingredients, that this backlash is going to be more profitable for us to conform than it is going to be for us to fight it. And at the pharmaceutical level, nearly every Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company has had earnings calls with their leaders addressing MAHA to their analysts. And the answer can't be to your analysts and investors that we're going to defeat the movement. You can defeat some of the personalities. You could take people like me out, or Callie Means, or Vani Hari. You can assault us, but the movement is so broad right now, and I think it encompasses so many key members of the administration. I'll never forget the day that I was at the White House, and I was graciously invited with a host of other influencers. And I remember Bobby Kennedy sitting down with that report, and I was sitting right there in the front row. And as the different key members of this administration, Health and Human Services, National Institute of Health, Centers for Disease Control, Food and Drug Administration, the Agriculture, Veterans Affairs, you see the commitment at the highest levels to push this movement forward. So you are not alone. I mean, don't allow these hit pieces on personalities to detract from the mission that we all have. I believe that this is as much of a spiritual revolution as it is, and I don't mean a religious revolution. I mean a spiritual revolution between right and wrong. And just like Bobby Kennedy said, at some point we're going to care less about our political beliefs and more about the future for our children. And so that should give you the resolve that you need to continue to post, to continue to forward this movement. I'd really ask you again, as I did last week, after this call, everyone's going to get an email, and in that email will be assets that you can freely use and post again. There are articles about legislative wins. There are bullet point talking topics that you can use just in your communities. And don't think that your voice is too small to make a difference. You don't have to have millions of followers on social media to have kitchen table conversations about how important this is to the future of our country. And it's statistically very disturbing to me, as a father of 3 children, and the caretaker of 4, to think that our children have a shorter life expectancy than we do. As a mortality researcher for more than 20 years, that is the first time in modern American history that our life expectancy has gone backwards, and that our children's life expectancy has gone backwards. So continue the resolve. Ignore the hit pieces. That's a sign that we're winning. And please, repopulate those assets, and just know that every single voice matters. Every one of your touch points matters. And I'll cede the floor back to people that probably have something more important to say.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Robert Malone, I was saying before you came on that you had been subjected to incredible smear campaigns, just like Bobby Kennedy has over the last, many, many years. And, so we all just need to fight back. So let's talk about that a bit. Let's think about it, but let's also celebrate all the incredible wins that we've had this week and in the last few weeks. Welcome, Dr. Malone.
Thank you, Tony. Let's see if the switcher works. Are we on?
Yes.
Eric? You're live.
Okay. I'm still seeing Tony's face, so that's all good. I don't mind looking at Tony, but rather than myself. So we have had some big wins. We've had a lot of turbulence. I can't believe the news cycle associated with the CDC over the last couple of weeks. One thing that I wanted to share with everybody here in terms of good news that just came across the transom to me is that Lynn Redwood, who was the founding CEO of Children's Health Defense, has accepted the position of serving as a special government employee under HHS, so under Secretary Kennedy, as have so many others, including myself. And Lynn, in particular, is now appointed to the CDC Immunization Safety Office. She happens to be in the White House today, and she's one of the two key political leaders now in the CDC Immunization Safety Office, which I can tell you has been the home of some of these interesting characters that recently resigned and have been very active on a variety of different media channels, not the least of which is the Washington Post op-ed this morning that's dropped from another one of those, the former chief medical officer, who is once again characterizing Secretary Kennedy as having politicized the CDC, politicized the HHS, et cetera, et cetera. These are folks that are deeply embedded in their belief system. And I just want to touch on that for a minute as it relates to propaganda and psychological warfare. It's really easy for us to demonize our opponents, but these folks, I believe, sincerely are invested in you could call it a cult. There's merit to that. It's a belief system that they are saving lives by advancing the logic of a shot in every arm. They truly believe, if you're a person prone to theology, they basically believe they're doing God's work by promoting the logic of vaccines and vaccine mandates. And what we're confronting is a belief system that is, they cloak themselves like Tony Fauci in the logic of we are the science, which is, many people now refer to that commonly as scientism, but they aren't really functioning as independent thinkers and as scientists. They're not assessing the safety and efficacy of these products objectively and determining what they're good for and what they're not good for. I know there are some of you in this population, in this audience, that are on board that no vaccines should be administered and that all vaccines are bad. I'm of the opinion that it's a fundamental of medical ethics, and has been for years, that the patient has the right to determine whether or not they want to accept a medical procedure, and that the physician has the obligation to provide that patient or that individual with the information they need in order to make an informed decision about whether or not it's good for them or not good for them. And this is a fundamentally libertarian position, but I think it's also common sense. The state should not be the one telling us whether or not we are to accept a medical procedure. And I can tell you, I hope I'm not speaking out of school, there are folks on the ACIP that I was just corresponding with that are strongly opposed to the decision that was just made in the state of Florida under Joe Latipo, a personal friend, to eliminate the governmental mandates for vaccines. These folks truly believe that those of us who fit this criteria, and I'm going to touch base on that because it's a key term that is weaponized against us, According to Merriam-Webster, if you are not in favor of vaccine mandates, you are an anti-vaxxer. That's how the term is defined. So let's be clear on that. When the press accuses us of being anti-vaxxers, as they routinely do to me, somebody who's spent their entire career developing vaccines and vaccine technology, but insisting that it be done right and proper and safely, they accuse me of being an anti-vaxxer, and they completely skip over the nuance that I am absolutely against governmental mandates to accept vaccines or other medical procedures. But that's how this weaponized environment has developed. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about what we're seeing in the press. So we documented on X on Saturday that there are many tens, if not hundreds, of harmonized articles attacking the Secretary Kennedy, that were published last Saturday, following the very high-profile resignations and protest at the CDC. And you'll recall that the narrative that those individuals from the CDC have been promoting in their resignation letters is that Secretary Kennedy and the ACIP are basically imposing a political agenda on the, quote, science of the CDC and the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. But as was documented by Marianne Damasi in her interview with Retzef Levy, the head of the ACIP COVID Working Group Subcommittee that just met this morning for the first time, none of the disagreements had to do with vaccine policy. What they had to do with was the CDC staff, these permanent, basically bureaucrat administrators, insisting that they had the right to determine what topics the ACIP would investigate and who would be allowed to provide information in the context of those investigations. That's what that battle, which by the way lasted almost 7 weeks, was over, was whether or not the CDC would control what questions we would ask and what information we would gather, or would the ACIP be allowed to function independently as it's intended to by statute as a federal advisory committee to provide independent advice to the, in this case, director of the CDC. And by the way, now with her resignation, this advice is going to go to the secretary. He's going to make the decision. So that's what went down. But what we heard was this reinforced narrative again and again and again, harmonized all across social media and corporate media, that Secretary Kennedy needs to be fired by the president because he is politicizing public health. That's the narrative that's being reinforced. Now, why, you might ask, is all of this suddenly coming to fore? Well, one reason, as we've documented in our Substack and others have documented, is that the industry lobbying group BIO, there's two major pharmaceutical industry lobbying groups. One is called Pharma and the other is called BIO. Pharma is more biased towards, let's say, petroleum-based compounds, and bio is more biased towards vaccines, biologics, and of course the RNA products. Bio's the smaller of the two. Bio has a total war chest for lobbying and influencing of about 4 million. And a memo was leaked a little while ago from a recent meeting held at Bio. They have not denied this in any way, that they decided to deploy 2 million of their 4 million war chest with the specific objective of having the secretary fired by the end of September. And they specifically said that they were going to deploy a wide range of technologies to achieve this. One of which, by the way, is the purchasing of influencers The going rate, by the way, is $1,000 a post. Purchasing in particular of conservative influencers to post things that would advocate against the interests of MAHA and against the interests of the secretary and advocate that the secretary be fired by the president. So when you see all of these harmonized messages coming out from corporate media, the first thing you should note when you see that signal is that somebody, some power, some force of money, pressure of money is behind that, because otherwise you get these articles pop up spontaneously, randomly at different points in time. When you see all this come as a pressure, harmonized, that teaches you that there's something that is driving this agenda. And the essence of that is that the technology that we used to call marketing and propaganda has become incredibly powerful, as documented in the book that Tony kindly published for us called Satire, with myself and my wife, Dr. Jill Glasspool Malone, as authors. And in that, we document the current state of modern propaganda and psychological warfare. Those techniques have been assimilated as a key part of marketing by the pharmaceutical industry. So when you see all of this messaging, and you'll see, for instance, key things like low complexity bots and trolls accounts, pushing out narratives that are all aligned and harmonized. You see all these corporate media positions being put out. You see this stuff coming from Atlantic Monthly, New York Times, Washington Post, et cetera, that's all aligned around the same agenda. And you see Charles Schumer saying the same thing. You see the same political actors all speaking in harmony with these agendas. That is a clear sign that there is a force going on here of concerted lobbying. And that's what we're experiencing. It's coming from big pharma. It's coming from bio. In this particular moment, it's also coming, of course, just step back for a minute. Secretary Kennedy and our movement are taking on the most powerful, highly funded, organized, big corporate interests in the world. And they're not just taking on one. They're taking on a whole bunch of them all at the same time. It's amazing for me to watch, but it's no surprise that we're seeing this. And what happened over the last 3-day weekend, I think really should give all of you heart and faith. Because what I saw, particularly on Monday, when we had these narratives coming out, the interview from the, I'll just say, gentleman from the CDC that resigned in this division that now Lynn Redwood is one of the key political policymakers. And he went on his little tour. What happened was social media just destroyed him. And what also happened was the classic example of the effect where when you try to cover up information, you end up drawing a lot more attention to it, and people started focusing on and posting things about the past, let's say, transgressions of the CDC, not the least of which is the Tuskegee experiment and many other things. But what I saw was all of you came out in support of the secretary and really turned the tide. I saw on Friday, there was significant threats. On Saturday, there was this wave of corporate media. And Sunday and Monday, that they just got roasted on X and all the other social media channels. And that was you guys doing it. But remember that when you're hearing these voices, these posts saying, oh, this little kind of nitpicky concern trolling. Oh, Bobby, yeah, okay, he's great, but he's not doing this, or he's not doing that, or he's not doing enough, or why hasn't he automatically banned all the mRNA products, et cetera, et cetera. That's often coming from folks that are being paid to divide so that they can divide and conquer, divide our movement. And so I want to leave you with that. I don't want to monopolize this, but just be aware that modern psychological warfare, fifth generation warfare technology is incredibly powerful. It seeks to control everything that you encounter, all information, what you think, what you believe,
I'm
and
ready.
what you feel. And don't fall for it.
I'm ready.
Stay
Sorry.
focused
Oh, my
on your
cell phone.
own soul, your own heart, your own belief system, and keep pushing for this movement, which, as Tony points out to me, is the most powerful grassroots force going in American politics, bar none. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Robert. And next up, we have one of the greatest fighters of all time, Dr. Oz.
Hey, Tony, thank you. Robert, good hearing your words as well. You know, I just got off a show and I was being asked about Secretary Kennedy, and I quoted his father because he's been quoting his dad, and I'll paraphrase it, but basically, progress requires change, but change has enemies. And I think you're seeing that very meticulously orchestrated by some very clever folks right now. And a lot of the things that we're talking about have to do with how you actually implement the MAHA program within government. So let's just be crystal clear about what that takes. And there's some actual living examples of that. When the secretary took the position of secretary, he vowed that he would put the human back in health and human services. So I was told to do that at CMS. We have about $1.7 trillion that we spend on Medicare, Medicaid, and other ways we provide social safety net insurance in America. But to do it wisely, you want to get people healthy, because more than half of that $1.7 trillion is spent because of chronic illness. Diseases caused because we have not actually implemented a lifestyle in America that's conducive to long-term survival, at least for mammals. And so when you look at those numbers, you start thinking, my goodness, it's an imperative. We got to take this seriously. So we have a whole MAHA agenda within CMS, and it ranges from getting more primary care doctors in the practice to using our tools to educate young people about nutrition to do just that. We have models that we're exploring and launching that implement MAHA ideas in the actual practice of medicine in America. So you develop new habits, new ways of incentivizing people doing the right things. But it wasn't just me. Secretary demanded the exact same thing from Marty McCary. Marty's a spectacular commissioner for the FDA. It's a tough job, and Marty's making tough decisions, again, for the betterment of the American people, getting rid of conflicts of interest, making sure that the approval process is honest, there's integrity and trust built behind the medications that we would offer. We have the same thing with Jay Bhattacharya, who's running NIH, who says, well, guys, I'm going to study the questions that the moms of America are asking. Not just esoteric science experiments, but like what's actually causing some of the problems that is destroying our health, making it difficult to raise families that are as healthy as we were when we were kids. And some of those ideas are now being released in different ways as evidence and data that you can use to guide better health for your family. So the Secretary's already done this in three massive groups, CMS, FDA, and NIH. He's challenged at the CDC because the CDC has some bigger problems. And just to remind everybody, not that you need to be reminded, it has been an abject failure in the management of COVID. Now, there's always bright spots here and there, but in general, it was a dark period for us when we not only had mandates that didn't make sense in retrospect, and which I won't regale you with, but those of us who were fighting in this battle recognize how painful it is to bring up something like we need to close schools when the CDC guidelines are being written by the teachers union. So, and then you get canceled, which is what happened to all of us, including Jay, Marty, me, Bobby, and he calls us renegades because we were all canceled. And I think there's a freeing that happens when you're canceled, because now they can't cancel you twice. So you just keep going hard at the finish line, which is what you're witnessing right now. And I think over time, as more and more folks become appreciative of the failings of the CDC, you realize why it's so urgent that we get together to fix these problems, because it's our early warning system for communicable diseases like a pandemic. It also should be helping us with, if we wanted to, chronic disease. There's all kinds of slowness in its response to the imperative to modernize. So with data, with people, with training, with investment, all these have lagged behind the times, and we've gotten comfortable with the status quo, and that complacency is not a good thing for the American people. So Secretary Kennedy appropriately is fighting hard to make sure the right people in the right job doing the right things and being watched by him and others. And he was put in that job by the president because he has the ability to make that change happen. Now, I'm going to focus for 2 seconds on CMS, and then I'll pass it on to whoever's next in the gauntlet that we've created for you. And I've got to applaud Tony for bringing together a lot of folks, and I can tell you he does not take no for an answer. So when he calls and says, cancel it, come on, you become a must appear venue for certainly those of us in government. And I see Cheryl Hines over there looking beautiful as usual. And I'm sure he dragged her out of something she was doing that was fun and enjoyable. But because this is fun and enjoyable for us, fighting for what's right, because for too long we have been silenced. So within CMS, we've got a couple ideas. I wrote down some of these. You're going to be hearing a lot about this. There's an effort to use tools like apps more actively in the MAHA movement. We're going to help fund some of these at CMS. So if people want to have MAHA-friendly digital tools to support their well-being, you'll have that. Again, it's your medical data. You control your records. You own them. You paid for them. But if you want to share them with folks that can help you with some chronic illness you're struggling with, we're going to make it possible. That's something that should have happened already. Just the same way you can pick what videos you stream and how you do your banking, you'll have choices there. You're going to hear on Friday about a massive effort to improve rural health. The Rural Health Transformation Fund is a $50 billion, that's billion-dollar investment we're going to make to improve rural healthcare in America. Rural healthcare, just to give some numbers, 20% increase incidence of all chronic disease, 50% increase incidence if you're in a rural area of suicide. Your life expectancy is 3 years shorter than the average Americans, and the average American's 5 years shorter than the average Europeans. So we're not doing well, and we used to be pretty equal. Between us and Europe when I was in medical school, which wasn't that long ago. And so, we've been just falling behind. Again, these are issues that are evidence of the CDC's not being able to keep up with the challenges of keeping the American people healthy. But the brave decisions at every level only happen because we've got folks out there supporting the initiative, being loud in your own ways to make sure people hear the counter arguments. And what I love doing is reading to traditional media piece or watching something on traditional media and lamenting the fact that it's dishonest, but then quickly you can pivot that to all the insights you have that others don't have. I've just asked on the show I just finished about the removal of vaccine mandates in Florida. That's just a great example. Get loud. That happened because there was air cover, I argue, that Secretary Kennedy offered to the concept of freeing parents to work out what they want for their kids with their doctors. That seems like a self-evident, obvious thing you would do. But in the modern era, you're crossing the Rubicon. How could you possibly do that? I think that was the right decision there. But if people don't get, noisy about it, then folks who aren't paying attention to this as closely as many of you are, start to believe the narrative that they hear in legacy media. And that is something that you can really help us on. And I'm speaking to someone who's, I'm here. Here's the Capitol over here. I'll show you what it looks like from my office. By the way, it's 3 floors below Bobby's, but we're looking right there. And I tell you, in government, it makes a difference what people outside government say. So make noise. All right. God bless you all. Stay safe and make some noise.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's a great point that that all of you guys on this call, you have so much power, and we need every one of you to post and to repost and to follow Dr. Oz, follow Secretary Kennedy, really watch closely what's going on and amplify it, because there's so much good that's going on now and you just don't read about it in any newspaper. Nobody will cover it fairly. So we have to do it. It's our obligation. We all want to do it. I enjoy doing it, so I think that take the power, take the opportunity. You can really do just incredible things. Now we have Cheryl Hines. Thanks so much for coming on.
Muted.
Okay, how about that?
Perfect.
Okay, great.
I'm going to give you endless grief about that. I'm so happy you made a mistake. I've never seen it before.
I know I never make mistakes. This is so unusual. Well, I'm in Paris. So sorry that I was late, but I've heard what you're all saying, and yes, right now is a crucial time. There's a lot of noise out there, and there are a lot of people, like you said, Dr. Oz, that are coming loudly. And it's going to be our job to be louder. So I know that Bobby is preparing right now for his day of Senate hearings tomorrow. And that he's, of course, taking very seriously and is doing a lot of work. So let's all support him. Let's keep supporting him. I know I've said this before, and I will say it every time I talk. I know that Bobby personally is grateful to all of you that are getting the messages out, that are fighting for Bobby and for everyone at HHS, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. And now happy to have Dr. Eric Berg, who has been fighting so hard for all of us, for our children, comes on to all of our shows, posts so many things. Thank you, Dr. Berg, and welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Tony?
Yes.
Yeah, so, industry doesn't communicate from industry. It communicates through PR firms. I want to talk a little bit about media, and they hire corporate influencers that communicate through, as experts. But, Ogilvy is one of the large PR firms, billion-dollar PR firm, and they basically have an army of health influencers that they basically pay a lot of money. And I think when you see these hit pieces on RFK and MAHA Group, you just have to really look at a couple things. And I want to kind of go through it because it would be so nice if they could just, take responsibility and clean up the truth of the harms but instead they just kind of they spin it to try to regain trust, and that's really what they're running into now is they lost the trust with people, and so the way they're getting it I don't think is ever going to work because you can't manufacture trust. You have to take responsibility if you're getting trust. But I want to just cover a couple different areas and some of the spins that they're using on starting with like seed oils, right? So seed oils, the spin is like, well, there's no reason to avoid them. When we substitute them with saturated fats with unsaturated fats, the heart rate went down, diabetes went down. So the science is obviously settled. But what you need to know is they didn't use cold press oils. They didn't do these studies on the repeated refrying at the fast food restaurants because all the byproducts of these oils create these sticky glue particles called aldehydes that literally destroy our health. So what we're going to be creating is some really good information for you to repost and share and make it easy for you to put out there so to help us put out the truth of these things. Like even like the childhood vaccines, they're say they're safe and effective. We've done the safety studies, and that's true. They have done safety studies, but they haven't done the safety studies that you might think. They don't compare these vaccines to actual placebo. They compare it to another vaccine. So it's kind of like comparing Coke to Pepsi and say, well, it's not any less dangerous, so it's safe. So these it's not necessarily that they straight out lie, but they're kind of altering the truth on these things in a major way. Autism, for example, in 1970, 1 in 10,000 people had autism, and now it's 1 in 36. And their spin on it is, well, that's because of our diagnostics. It's always been there, but now we're finally recognizing it, which I would like to see one study that shows that 100% of the increase in autism has come from our diagnostic. There is nothing out there that's not even close to being credible. So again, there's certain points about these arguments I think we should emphasize, and we're going to be listing them on the MAHA site. The SNAP program, we're trying to get rid of sodas but of course the beverage lobbyists are just putting massive money against this, spending this all over the place. You know, we're punishing the poor. We should give people the freedom to consume what they want. But wait a second, like taxpayers, I don't want to pay for someone eating junk food and then also pay for the medical bills that they're going to have to get after that. And also paid a third time where we subsidize the corn that makes this high fructose corn syrup. So these are all little points that I think we should put out there, because this is purely manufactured news that we're hearing on a constant basis. And then the mental health screenings in the school system, like this is a real big scam. Unfortunately, they're saying, well, we need more screenings to save more lives. This is a complete funnel right into big pharma. You get these kids on drugs early, you get them labeled, and now they're part of the whole system. So unfortunately, we're working in this PR battle right now, and we have to use PR to win it. And I just wanted to kind of point out some examples. We'll be putting more of this in the emails and newsletters. So yeah, that's try to cram it in there 3 minutes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Berg. And next up, we have an incredible fighter, Mary Holland. She's been part of hundreds of lawsuits, many of them with Bobby Kennedy, and really is just a tireless fighter. So happy to have her on the show.
Tony, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with all of you. And I'm so grateful to all of you for everything that you're doing. I don't think anybody embodies how to deal with the vitriol better than Bobby Kennedy. He's been dealing with it for, close to 20 years. And I think he just doesn't let it get to him. And we can't let it get to us either. But we do have to fight back. And so Bobby has this incredibly important hearing tomorrow before the Senate Finance Committee. So we at Children's Health Defense, with the help of Greg Glazer, a friend whose idea this was, have put out something that you can put on social media. And that is to have your kids with you and say, thank you, RFK Jr. Thank you, Bobby. The many things that Bobby's done. Bobby entered this job to protect our kids and for the future. And so I think if we had a campaign, anything you can do, put on your social media, reach out to your friends, show the kids with you, do it with you so that it's very clear that we're not exploiting children in any way. Or if you don't want your kids on social media, which I completely understand, then just put up pictures of kids that you can find elsewhere. But let's thank Bobby, because as he said, and we showed at the beginning of this, we have to love our kids more than we hate one another. Let's show that to Bobby and to the world, to the media right now on the eve of this really important hearing tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, now thanks so much, Mary. And Children's Health Defense is just doing great work, and I'm really grateful, and I know all of us are grateful for the work that you and your whole team are doing there.
Thank you, Tony.
Next up, we have Russell Brand.
Hello, everyone. It's lovely to see you again. And thanks, Tony, and thanks, Mary. I'm just reading this on Substack by Aaron Kierity. And he's talking about scientism and the evolution of orthodoxies that flow out of science while denying the practical process upon which science is founded, i.e. an ongoing dialectic and conversation about empirical truths as discovered through the process of observation or clinical trial, and how scientism leads to a form of totalitarianism. The reason that a figure like Bobby Kennedy has moved from the margins and the periphery to the very center of the political establishment in terms of his power and his influence and his control at the HHS is because of authenticity and because of his integrity, and because, as the last speaker articulated, because he's been willing to stand up for consistently what he believes in. Now, the sort of danger of scientism, a kind of replacement of high principles at the heart of institutions means that people get to establish orthodoxies, control, totalitarianism, prevent us kind of scrutiny that would come if you made those claims or tried to assert that type of control through, for example, religious authority. It says here, it cites the political theorist Eric Vogelin, who observed the essence of totalitarianism is simply that certain questions are forbidden. If one asks inconvenient questions like, do we really need to continue locking down? This will not spur reasoned discussion or civil debate. Instead, one will simply be accused of being a pandemic denier, wanting to kill grandma, being anti-science, or placing oneself on the wrong side of history. We recognize that there was a sort of point during the pandemic where Anthony Fauci conflated his personhood with the idea of science. I am the science, I think, is what he memorably said. Now, I feel that the control of the information space is a critical battle that we're involved in. The most critical battle of all is likely the spiritual warfare that undergirds all of this. Whilst there might be a diversity of opinion, even on this call, on a number of subjects, on this matter of authenticity and integrity, on matters of children eating foods that are nutritional rather than addictive, and the medical establishment, in particular the pharmacological establishment, being held to account, is an area where we have to be in absolute alignment with one another. And that means continuing to back Bobby Kennedy and continuing to amplify this information. Whilst Bobby is being subject to a lot of attack, and the CDC resignations and the way that's being reported on, and even the way he was attacked in mainstream media by sort of apparently, sort of I guess you would say authentic communicators like, say, Stephen Colbert or John Oliver, comedians that I kind of respect, that the attacks that Bobby received there was a sort of an awakening for me of how this establishment works when it comes to figures that are genuinely willing to confront the establishment. I suppose that what previous speakers have said remains absolutely critical and true, that there has to be some unity, some continuity of messaging, and most importantly of all, ongoing support. I know that you are at risk if you speak out against powerful interests. There are ways of amplifying messages and even coordinating attacks that are pretty staggering the more you learn about them, and certainly if you experience them. And we shouldn't be surprised if Secretary Kennedy encounters that kind of resistance. Obviously, he will at various points. And so I suppose that our obligation is to remain aligned and awakened. And I would say, above all else, alert to the spiritual dimension of what's currently taking place. Tony, thanks again for including me in this call. Take care, man.
Thanks so much, Russell. Next up, we have Joel Salatin, who's been fighting Big Ag and their sort of pushback on all the things that MAHA is fighting for. And, one of the things that's going on there is that they're trying to get farmers to kind of fight other farmers and to, make them think that they need to fight MAHA. So it's a complicated battle, and Joel is right at the center of it.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for for inviting me on the call here today. This has been a real privilege and an honor for me. I've been called a bioterrorist, typhoid Mary, starvation advocate, and the worst thing you can ever do in this space is to dare to say there are good farmers and bad farmers, or there is good farming and bad farming. And so I do that, but I'm gentle on it. And I think the critical interest here is the tension in philosophy. And so I would just propose, as we discuss these issues, the Socratic method really works. And you can ask somebody, well, do you trust chemicals more than compost? That's a fair question. And I think when we ask these kinds of questions, do you think life is fundamentally mechanical or biological? Do you think nature moves toward monospeciation or diversification? These are incredible questions that unearth kind of the underlying philosophical things, because when you get into the policy realm, everything moves around my ox getting gored or a jobs program. Callie Means talks about this, that everything at USDA I call it the USDA. Everything at the USDA is about jobs. And so, rather than getting in an argument about, well, what should we outlaw, what should we regulate, what should we not, I'm a very big proponent that I think that we can get where we want to go faster in change by, rather than picking off the bad things, how about we empower the good things? And so my agenda has been what I call a food emancipation proclamation, and I'm looking for a 30-minute pitch time with Trump. I can't imagine something more Trumpian than a food emancipation proclamation to free up our enslaved food system from the shackles of big ag and the captured agency, like RFK Jr. talks about all the time. And I'm not interested in abolition. I don't have time for, well, do we outlaw ractopamine in pork? Do we outlaw factory farming or glyphosate or whatever? I think the fastest way to make a change is not by trying to regulate out the things we don't like, but rather freeing up the things we do like. So I'm not an abolitionist of what's wrong. What I am is I am an absolute crusader for a functional underground railroad, an underground railroad, so that those of us who want to get out of the system can. Right now, if I want to buy a chicken pot pie from Aunt Alice at church, she can't make one and sell it to me. That's illegal. We should be able to have food transactional commerce, neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, without asking the government's permission. This is one of the single most important elements of bringing safety and security and all those back to the system. The fact is that the government track record has been terrible. The government told us to not use butter and lard and use hydrogenated vegetable oil. The government told us to use DDT. The government made a food pyramid that put Cheerios and Twinkies on the bottom and good stuff on the at the peak of the top that you're not supposed to eat. And so we can track our health dysfunction in our country directly to government advice and government intervention. And so the question then is, how do we empower people? I think as long as MAHA empowers people to make their own decisions, whether it's on vaccine, whether it's on their food, whether it's on their education, whatever it is, as long as MAHA keeps pushing the power into freedom of choice for people, we will be on the right track. And that presents a positive message rather than a negative message of let's take this down, let's take that down, let's stop this. Gandhi, I'll quit with this. Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they make fun of you, then they fight you, then you win. Hey, everybody, we're in fight mode. They are fighting back. We've got their attention. They can't ignore us. They can't make fun of us anymore and think they win. They're fighting us. We are one step away from winning. Hang in there.
Joel, that was really great. Bobby Kennedy says it all the time that he doesn't want to ban things. He wants to have people get the information that's out there so that they can make good decisions for themselves. And I mean, that's what this is all about. We got to get rid of every kind of liability shield, make sure we don't start new ones, and, let people make choices and let the free market punish people who create bad products and help people who create things that make us all healthy.
That's right. This is called, ultimately, it's Uberizing. We need to Uberize the food system. We now have the butcher, baker, and candlestick maker embedded in a global voice via the democratization of authentic vetting through the internet in real time. And that needs to become to the food system to give us freedom of choice. So we include freedom of choice in our food system, like we put freedom of choice in the bedroom, bathroom, and womb. Let's put freedom of choice in the kitchen.
Thanks so much, Joel. On a much lighter note, we now have JP Sears, and he's planning on, telling us how to make truth go viral through satire, turning the worst kind of attacks into content opportunities, and then also to look at why authoritarians hate so much to be laughed at. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Pleasure to be here with y'all. Took time out of my busy afternoon of writing hit pieces on Dr. Malone and Gary Brecka. But nonetheless, I also want to just acknowledge everybody on this call. Call ourselves influencers. We're humans. We have influence. So everyone on this call, y'all are making a difference. We're all cells in the body of humanity. I don't care if you have 10 followers, 0 followers, and you just talk to people at your dinner table, or you have 10 million followers. Y'all make a difference. We make a difference. In fact, so much so, I wouldn't say we're here in the MAHA movement because of Bobby Kennedy. I would say Bobby Kennedy is the secretary because of this movement. He's the figurehead, and thank God he's in the position he's in. But I just want to acknowledge everyone's contribution. And if you ever make the mistake of thinking, well, I'm just one person, what can I do? We're all cells in the body of humanity. The body is made up of many cells. And when the cells work together, we're moving towards health. And I think that is what we're doing. And the interesting thing is we're not funded. It's really, really not profitable to have great health. Like, there's no toxic free living industrial complex. There's no get good sleep industrial complex. But of course, what there is the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the seed oil industrial complex. So of course, that creates opposition to us that wants to silence us. And the term hit piece has come up a few times, and I would dare say we the people, this is our time. I mean, we are winning. We have reclaimed so much power, and we will ultimately win unless we choose not to. And here's how I think we would potentially choose not to. We feel intimidated. The millions and billions of dollars that are spent, the smear articles that come out, the hit pieces, the intimidation leaves us scared. Like, wow, I spoke truth. I know I'm on the right side of history here. I spoke truth. Nasty words came back. That hurt. Touched the hot stove. Never gonna do it again. That's how we lose if we choose to do that. But I think we can choose a better way. And just a moment on how to deal with negativity, because I think it's the only thing that can stop us if we let it. Well, a hit piece, it might be, an article's written about you, or, the latest one about Bobby Kennedy, or it might be a negative comment to a post you made. It came from one person. They're the same thing. They're hit pieces. How you react to that, I just like to share a couple things from my experience that I've had to work through. I've gone through tough times, hit pieces, cancel culture, all that garbage. First thing I would say is it's easy to take it personally. Yes, it hurts when there's disapproval, negativity, fear comes up. It's kind of scary. But I would invite you, it's so powerful to reframe that. When you see the hit piece, the negative comment, take that as a sign you are doing something right. You are doing something right that, as it's been said on this call before, in the battle of spiritual warfare, you are doing something that threatens a pretty darn evil agenda. So take that as a pat on the back. In fact, if you're not having negative comments and hit pieces, I would just ask you, are you really trying? So please take it as a sign that you're doing something right. And also please notice this. Yeah, negativity, it can feel bad in the moment, but keep listening to your body. If you spoke your truth and you keep speaking your truth, notice how damn good that feels. It's one thing to speak truth. It feels really good. But when you speak truth, when it's hard to speak truth, scary in the moment, might not feel good, but just wait for the echo. It feels really good when you're speaking truth, when it's hard to do. That's called fulfillment. It's called courage. So lastly, I would just frame it in the big picture. I always, when I'm about to put something out or there's negativity or, beginning of COVID, there were like, damn, do I really want to stand for what I stand for? This is nuts. I would ask you to just go to a place in your imagination, go to your deathbed and ask yourself, what would you be proud of and what would you regret? Would you look back on your deathbed remembering back the year 2025, like, wow, I could have voiced support for Bobby Kennedy. I could have highlighted the truth about this and nutrition, but boy, I regret having the courage to stay principled and speak the truth. Probably not. We'll probably regret what we didn't say. We'll probably regret when we were intimidated. So we can have the short-term gain of pain avoidance, but the long-term living hell of feeling as though we betrayed ourselves. Lastly, I realize it's fun to talk to an echo chamber. This is a bit of an echo chamber. I'm sure there's some trolls and media people on here kind of hiding out. We want to find something to, write negative about some of these speakers. And by the way, if that's you, I just want you to know you don't have to behave like a cancer consciousness. You're welcome. We are not political. We stand for humanity. But nonetheless, it's one thing preaching to the choir. It's another thing. We want to reach people. We want to spread this message. Something I've learned about that, whether you call it going viral, not so much like the Wuhan lab kind of going viral, but going viral, like spreading good, healthy things. We need to be relatable. We need to have compassion. We need to have understanding. And dare I say, we need to have an attitude of acceptance. So what I mean by that, on the opposite end, how not to spread this message is just preaching, shaming people for being wrong, just being combative. We're not going to shame anybody into joining our movement. And dare I say, if someone joins a movement out of shame, they're just being a sheep. We want people awake. We want them proactive. So when you think about it, I would frame it when you're voicing things, do your best to not have an agreement-based relationship with your audience where, we're creating division if you don't agree with me and I'm shaming the other side. Aim for acceptance. And one way I do that is I try to have an understanding in some of my content by showing where I've changed my mind. For example, a piece might be, here's why I used to think seed oils were safer. Here's why I used to think butter was dangerous. A few of my videos that I put on my comedy channel that have zero comedy in them, but have done extremely well, is simply because they had an acceptance-based invitation to people. I have one called Why I Changed My Mind About Guns. Why I changed my mind about God, why I was wrong about abortion. And for me, what that models is an acceptance-based relationship with my audience. I used to think this, and I accept myself for changing my mind. And it kind of extends that olive branch to other people where we're not saying you're wrong for believing something different. We're saying, I understand why you believe what you believe, and here's how I look at it. So I don't think we need more division. I don't think division will grow our movement. By definition, it'll probably make it smaller. And because we don't stand, this isn't political, this is human. It's health. It's something that everybody deserves. It's truly our birthright. Some are fighting like hell to deny their birthright, whether it's because they're funded or they're influenced by those who are funded. So my parting words would be, if you ever feel intimidated, it's because you're doing something right. How you respond to that intimidation, I would invite you to do it in a way that would make your future self on your deathbed have no freaking regrets.
Thanks so much, JP. That was great. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's great that there are a bunch of people on this show from mainstream media Many of them asked to be on, and we sent them links. You know, we want them to hear all these different points of view. You know, we don't really know what's leading them to attack us day and night. Some of them are just getting paid to do it. Some of them are misguided. You know, it's hard to know. But, you know, these are people who've been, you know, if you look at Bobby Kennedy, you know, they've been attacking him now for years, just day after day. I mean, the New York Times writes almost the same article, must have been 100 times with all the same buzzwords. It means nothing. It's just a waste of time. Nobody reads it. So, you know, they're just sort of filling up content. But what you've seen is that even after all of that, millions of Americans love what Bobby Kennedy's doing. And they know that all of these hit pieces mean that he's doing something good, meaning that he's going up against some of the most powerful people on the planet. You know, that he's being so incredibly brave, and that really helps all of us be brave. So thanks so much. And I love that concept of getting to the end of your life where nobody thinks back and says, I wish I had less guts. I was less brave, that I hadn't stood up for the things that I really care about. Nobody will actually get there, and people should really think about that. Now we have Callie Means, who's just been an incredible warrior, you know, on the White House side. He's going to give us some key updates on what's going on with MAHA, and give a call to action for all of us here for things that we can post, things that we can do, and really tell us where things are and where they need to go. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for coming
Thanks,
on.
Tony. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, what a great call. And Tony, thank you. And thank you to your group for doing God's work. From my view here at the White House and watching Secretary Kennedy just absolutely go to battle every day, I think this has been one of the best weeks for American health and for MAHA that we've ever had. We are in a battle. And I think we all know that. I think it's a battle of love. I think we're in this to battle for kids. But we are battling, I think, dark forces, not dark people necessarily, but some very pernicious forces that profit from sick kids. And I think what happened this week with this CDC news really framed what we're fighting against. Secretary Kennedy, with the full support of the White House, took action to do what he was really brought in to do, what he's been empowered by President Trump to do, which is reform our institutions. And the American people, I think, with what's happened at the CDC, have a very clear difference and a very clear choice to make, where the scientific community and many in the media are arguing that the status quo with our healthcare institutions is perfectly appropriate and the status quo is worth defending. And Bobby Kennedy is arguing that we have the sickest country in the developed world. We had a Chernobyl level disaster, a history-defining disaster with our response to the COVID pandemic, that we have serious rot in the institutions that we trust for public health advice, and that he and President Trump were elected to reform those institutions, get bad people out and put good people in. And it's a really, really clear choice. And, you know, my dear friends in the media, and I know some of them are trying to get the story right, but often you see these quotes from the experts, the anonymous experts. And I think we should be very grateful this week. We saw the face of those experts. We saw the person in charge of major parts of the CDC, the vaccine program at the CDC. And that expert posted on Christmas Day a devil worshiping ceremony. That person used his official capacity to argue that orgies are a normal part of daily life and should be evangelized. That person said that it's bigoted to use the word mother and that we must use the word birthing person and denigrate the unique spiritual and awe-inspiring act that only a woman can perform, which is birth. that person said that the greatest, the example of Bobby Kennedy's attack on science, they have these vague attacks, but when it came down to it, the specific point that he made was that Bobby Kennedy chose to take the COVID vaccine off the recommended schedule. That is a decision that over 90% of parents in the United States have already made. 90% of parents plus have already rejected the CDC guidance, and 85% of healthcare workers, according to a recent survey, have actually rejected the previous CDC guidance on the COVID vaccines. So what we essentially have is a medical elite and media that's arguing 90% of parents and 85% of healthcare workers are dangerous anti-science zealots, and that Bobby Kennedy, using new data, making that decision is dangerous to American health. That, at the end of the day, is their only proof point for what he's done that's attacking science. I guess you could also add his move on the ACIP committee, which is an orgy of corruption, which is an orgy of conflicts of interest. And I think he's, obviously there's clear support for him reforming the guidance panels and authorities that underlie our public health and have led in so many cases to the outcomes that we see today, which is the highest chronic disease rates in the world. So I think we should all be grateful. And I think the points being made on this call, we should approach this with love. This is a movement of love, but we are battling, in some cases, quite literally demonic forces who, for one reason or another, are aggressively invested in defending the status quo. I think the CDC decision really frames the stakes of what we're doing. And it gives me a lot of confidence because we are clearly, obviously, on the right side. This is messy. We're talking about the healthcare system, the food system. We're talking about the majority of the U.S. economy that Bobby Kennedy is working to address. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be mass information campaigns. There's going to be pain and messiness as this reform is committed. It's inevitable. But I think this week we've seen that light is shining through. And this is something Secretary Kennedy talks to his team and his core team, Dr. Oz and others, talk about all the time. We are trying to put good energy out there. We are trying to do the right thing. In closed door meetings, we are talking about how to improve children's health, how to get healthier food for kids. And there's a strong belief among Secretary Kennedy's team that in the midst of all this information warfare, that in the midst of all these attacks, all this frustration, all the pain from so many Americans who want to see change so quickly, and the opposition that's trying to delegitimize and attack what we're doing at any stage, we are very confident. Secretary Kennedy is confident that the energy that he is bringing through, that the public health awakening that he is helping to foster with President Trump, and the, I think, growing list of transformative policies that he's pushing through, that is going to show through. And I think it is, with just a recent poll, the two most popular political figures in America by far are Secretary Kennedy and President Trump. After all the attacks, Secretary Kennedy is, again, along with President Trump, one of the most popular political figures in America, drawing bipartisan support. I also want to say something I think the movement, I feel, is grappling with, we're all grappling with, is that there's a real cultural awakening happening. And I think honestly, what's happening around the country where people are taking more empowerment over their health is the great accomplishment of this movement. And that's really what's going to drive change, that more and more people are taking control of their health. We've also obviously taken power, and Secretary Kennedy's taking power over the federal government path and really trying to drive change to the federal government. I think it's all becoming clear this is a long-term journey. I feel, and I know many people feel, there's existential stakes. And I hear from a lot of folks, and I feel this too, we need to move faster. Children's lives are at stake. Children are dying every day. I do want to say the inevitable reality is that this is a long-term battle, though. The politics and our democracy is an intervention to drive often incremental change to prevent basically going to war with each other. And I think it is important and really admirable that with these existential stakes, Secretary Kennedy is engaging in discussions with everybody. And these are tough issues. I mean, we've talked about the farmers. farmers are great, great people. We all, and even they would agree, there's clearly a link between our food and our chronic disease rates. But you really get into complicated dynamics when you unwind these public policy issues. It's a fact that 98% of corn in the United States is sprayed with glyphosate. And that is a crucial part of the tools they use. Very good Kennedy supporting farmers. And these are really complicated, really messy, really robust conversations. And I just want to say that from my standpoint, I find it very inspiring. I find it very inspiring that Secretary Kennedy is working across the administration and working with stakeholders to advocate and to find solutions to these existential problems. I think the mix of, I would call a spiritual awakening happening in this country about health, where people are reading food labels, buying different products, thinking about giving their kids on less medications. These are all really positive things, and it's really going to drive the change. That mixed with Bobby Kennedy going to battle every single day to drive policy change. And I do think he's driven in his first year more significant public health and food policy reform in modern American history. If we can keep this movement together and keep chipping away on the cultural level and the policy level for the next 10 years, we are going to change the world. And I think what this MAHA movement, hopefully we're all realizing, and it's been a realization for me, is that we need to buckle up for a long-term battle. The fact of the reality, this is politics, and the leverage Bobby Kennedy has is that he's correct and that he has large public support behind him. Sorry, my phone froze. We must realize that if we like what's happening, if we like this light that's shining through, we've got to put that energy out for him, talk to our friends about it, bring more people to this movement, impact election after election after election. It is inspiring watching Secretary Kennedy in these meetings bringing up ideas that were ignored in the past. And the reason he has credibility on these ideas is not because he's right. We all know we're right. It's because there's an army of voters and so much energy behind him. And there's a realization throughout DC that his army is going to impact future elections. So I hope everyone feels incredible energy coming from this. I think we both have, in some ways the negative of the personnel change at the CDC. We also have incredible positives. I'm very excited about the NIH work on autism research. The NIH, a $50 billion institution that previously funded the creation of the COVID pandemic and then profited with hundreds of millions of dollars of royalty on the supposed cure, is now firmly in the seat of asking real questions, such as what's causing autism? How can we solve it? How can we ameliorate it? This is a transformation, and there's going to be more and more real questions asked from the NIH, and we're going to have news on that soon. So as far as asks, as far as kind of my 2 cents on what we can do, there's 2 things. The state and local activities, even what Mr. Salatin was talking about with actions on local farms, what you're buying. This energy is felt so strongly. What's happening on the local and state level gives so much leverage to what Secretary Kennedy is trying to do. And I've been amazed of how much can get done on the local and state level. So I'd really encourage everyone to stay in touch with Tony's group and get involved as state sessions come back into order. Get involved on your local level, talk to local members. Let's all organize to get change past the local level. And the other thing I'd say, and this is meaningful, is just keep that energy alive. And it's not just fully blindly supporting Secretary Kennedy. Quite frankly, the passion of this movement is the great asset. And when the MAHA base is frustrated with something, that's seen in DC. So it's not just to all stay in line. I'm not saying that. But trusting Secretary Kennedy, and I will say trusting President Trump, who has been an absolute warrior for this agenda, and making that energy clear does really, really help Secretary Kennedy. So thank you, Tony, and thank you everyone on the call. And we're winning, and let's keep pushing.
Kelly, that was really great. Thank you so much. I'm just going to restate some of the things that you said, that, people by the millions are inspired. They're controlling their health. They're going back to gyms. They're looking at food labels. They're not getting booster shots. They're not drugging their children nearly as much. so the work that we're doing is really paying off. And though the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, they're all telling us that all of this is dangerous. And we know it's not dangerous. We know that we listened to the experts for years and years, and we got the worst health outcomes of any of the 30 industrialized countries. So, we're going in the right direction. Bobby prayed for 19 years to have this opportunity. Donald Trump gave him the chance. And, this is really working. And if all of you get behind it, if you all share truth-telling content, post things that we send you, stick with it day after day, use hashtag MAHA Action so that we can track, all the progress and who's doing what and what we need to focus more on. And then go to mahaaction.com. Hopefully volunteer, get your friends to volunteer, get your friends to come on and watch this weekly show, 4 o'clock every Wednesday. And then go to MAHA Action and join the daily MAHA report, which I think is really putting out great content, stories, 2 or 3 times each day. We would love to get as many people as possible to read that, to write for it, and to join this revolution. It's working. We can win. Thank you to everybody.
We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution. We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution.
The only thing that will save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.